Okay, I think we're good. Ready? 3, 2, 1. What's going on, guys? Excited to start the golf show. Sorry for the delay. This is my first day hosting, and apparently this is a little bit harder than it looks. So I now had to earn some of those badges that I made fun of Prez about last week on Straight from the Strip. Joined today by Dave Cokin, the man, the myth, the legend. Nick, got lots of golf memorabilia behind you, so I hope you know your stuff based on the notes you sent me. I didn't even have to do any work for the travelers. I'm excited. Andy, I have no idea where the hell you are. I hope you're watching and jumping in the comments section because we could not get you on Skype today, so a little too late to change the backdrop here. Fellas, how are we?
Pretty good. Looking forward to having clear shots to the green. Hopefully it'll be a little more of a test this weekend.
Nick, your thoughts on last week?
Yeah, it was, from a general perspective of most people watching, it was fun, and the fact that it was a shootout. There was a ton of guys involved on Sunday that all could have won. I mean, at any given point in that back nine, there was a dozen or more guys that were either tied for the lead or one within a shot that had legitimate chances to win. And it was, from that standpoint, it was a lot of fun. I agree with Dave. Everybody likes the U.S. Open, right, where you see these guys struggle.
Well, it's kind of like I don't. It doesn't need to be U.S. Open tough, but at least put some rough out there.
Sure.
There was no rough there last week.
I like to call that
this week.
golf.
You're right.
It was a very easy course, and it makes me shoot around 100. Those are the kind of courses. No, I definitely couldn't have shot 100 at that course. But in all honesty, Dave, you're absolutely right. This was an interesting scoring event too. I know that a ton of bookmakers I spoke with in terms of how low the scores were. 32 guys would have beat last year's winners. So I want to talk to you guys about that here in a minute when we talk in terms of no fans, or if you actually think it was really just because the course was so easy itself.
No, I think it was just the course.
Yeah.
Because there were plenty of bad shots. There just wasn't any penalty for the bad shots. And it's not like it was the worst thing I've ever seen. I don't want to make it sound like I'm just bitching to be bitchy.
Are you sure you're not bitching just to be bitching?
No, I just want to see a little more of a test. And I think we'll get it this weekend. I don't think we're going to – hopefully we don't see 22 under as a winning score. Give me 14, 15 under. Now we're talking a tournament that I like.
Yeah, this course, TPC River Highlands. Look, guys, it's going to be a lot tighter and a lot shorter than last week. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if we do see some really good scores again here. I think there's a couple of guys on tour that are playing excellent golf. And when you start to hit your stride at this right time, good buddies with Gary Woodland. And if you guys heard his interview, he actually said that he thinks that no fans being there is almost, for some guys, better, because then you're just playing with the guys you're so used to playing. But for some guys, they want that adrenaline rush. Gary mentioned himself being one of those guys that they enjoy having that pressure, and they tend to play better under pressure. I kind of do a little cheat sheet from a website called basically smartgolfbets.com. And the way that I like to look at his information, that he breaks it down, he does a ton of cheat sheets for you. He has Justin Thomas, based on the odds. Also, he agrees with the bookmakers here as being the favorite. I'm curious to see who you guys like this weekend, and we can go from there. Nick, I'll start with you. Just kind of break down your thoughts on the course and who you really like this week.
Well, about the score in general, hopefully this week is a little, higher scoring. You got 4-inch rough this week, which should make it a little bit more penalizing, Dave, to your point, if we're straying off the tee. So hopefully that keeps them a little bit more in check. But this week, one guy that I'm kind of looking at right now that you're not really paying attention to or hearing much about is Brian Harman, who's kind of an under-the-radar type of a guy. He's 70-1 right now outright, which is, obviously a big ask to get him to get that. But he's 2 top 30s in the restart so far, and he has 2 top 10s in this event each of the last 2 seasons, and he plays here regularly. So it's a course he knows. He's playing well. He's been playing well all year. He's in the top 30 in overall scoring on the tour this year. So he's a guy that kind of flies under the radar. The betting markets aren't really big on him, so there's good value, I believe, in him this week. So he's a guy I'm definitely looking at as far as the outright markets go. And some, just trying to think, pull up my notes here.
I was actually going to pivot to Dave real quick. Dave, last week, I know that Jared hosted the show. He gave out Webb Simpson, which was really exciting for you guys to give out
Nice.
a pretty sizable underdog. I think he closed around the it looks like he was, what was he last week? Close to 30 to 1.
About 33 to 1.
Yeah, right around there.
Great underdogs. Nick just mentioned a pretty sizable underdog at 70 to 1. Sometimes with those types of,
it's even more sizable because if you shop around at Circa, Brian Harman is 90 to 1.
Now, there you go.
Here's my question. If you guys have a player like that, Nick, as you mentioned, maybe he can't finish the weekend, but maybe his first and second rounds, because he does have the familiarity with the course here, maybe he's worth looking at maybe a round one top five finish, something like that, maybe where you could find him in the 15 to 20 to 1 range.
Yes. If you like a guy that you think is going to have a good week, usually it starts off with a good first round. So, first round leader is always a good bet. I like top 20. It gives a little room for that, one bad round or maybe, as you said, full to the pressure. He's plus 300 right now in a top 20 finish, which is really good, 3 to 1 money on that. So I'm looking at him as a top 20 finisher. Again, the 70 to 1 or 90 to 1 that Dave found is definitely a long shot, but a top 20 I think is a really good play for him this week.
Talk about, and this is not, I'm going to have, I don't know if the package is up yet. It will be up shortly. I'm posting 5 outright plays this week. 5 guys that I'm picking and I'm playing them all equally at a couple of big prices in there, and it's only going to be $9. So it's a great buy. One of the guys that I'm not using is Bubba Watson, and this has been the Bubba Watson Invitational for the most part. He's won this tournament 3 times, which is interesting because you look at this course and say, well, that's not a great setup for Bubba because he's a bomber and he can get a little wild with his tee shots at times. So this would not normally be the course that you would select Bubba to be a go-with guy, and yet he's had great success here. But again, I didn't use him this weekend because I do look at his type of golf and just don't see him as a great fit this weekend. I will tell you, though, he scares me. He's a guy and that I'm a little nervous that I left off considering his track record here.
Dave, I agree with you. He won in 2010, 2015, and 2018, but in 2017, he missed the cut. 2019, He wasn't even in the top 50. So I think you're probably right leaving him off here. I think that maybe his odds, because he does have a decent history here, are probably not as favorable as they should be
I would agree with that.
2020. Another one that I'm kind of looking at here, and now he hasn't really done the best, but based on his odds, is Brooks Koepka. I'm trying to figure out why Brooks is so highly regarded by bookmakers at the specific course.
Well, I think that has to do less with the course than one day at the Heritage. I mean, he was awesome on the back 9, and the thought process, and there is something to this, is that when Koepka gets hot, he can stay hot for a while, and there is nobody better on the planet at putting the ball close to the pin from the fairway. I mean, he is just deadly. His back 9 was incredible on Sunday, so I think that's going to get him a lot of support. And he's not on my ticket, but he's another guy I'm very nervous about.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about him last week in the show about him being undervalued. He was 45 to 1 last week going in. You could get good money on him in a top 20 finish. And of course, he delivers, and he's plummeted to 20 to 1 this week. And you're right, Dave. It's all based on last week. He finally showed, coming back from injury, he finally showed that he had a good result, and he played all 4 rounds. He had a couple of tournaments this year where he just wasn't getting all 4 days together. So the market's adjusted big time, not because of the course, 100% because of what he did this last week. And you're right. Probably he's a guy you want to ride when he's hot, and he's scary when he's hot. He hits the ball far, and those short irons, as Dave mentioned, are great.
Another guy. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I wanted to mention, you talked about Gary Woodland. I keep on naming guys that I didn't play this week. Gary Woodland might have been my 6th guy in the 5-pack. I'm not going beyond 5, but he didn't play a real great tournament last weekend, but he was very good the week before that, and he's just a really solid player. The one thing I'm curious about Woodland is he's changed his body a little bit. He's gone the opposite way of Bryson DeChambeau.
Poor Bryson.
No, literally, DeChambeau put on the muscle and the pounds, and he looks like the Incredible Hulk out there. Woodland actually took off about 20 to 25 pounds. He thinks that's going to be something that'll serve him well. And I have a tendency to agree with him. I'm going to be interested to see if DeChambeau holds up. I think his endurance could be questionable with this new body and just bombing away. Whereas Woodland looks to be in the best shape of his life now, having taken off the weight. And I think Woodland's going to be a guy to really watch out for as the season progresses.
Something to speak of on that note, anytime you gain or lose a significant amount of weight in a short period of time and you don't have your coaches, I know some of these guys are still going to courses if they live in Florida. Arizona was never really closed down for golf, things like that. But a lot of people know that I'm good buddies with Colt Knost, and there was a period of time when Colt lost about 45 pounds, and it significantly affected his golf game so much he actually got downgraded to the Webb.com tour. So something to think about, too, when you do have those weight fluctuations that can affect your swings if you're used to having a belly and now you don't have one, or if your biceps are now larger, similar things of that, unless you've been consistently working with your swing coach throughout. So keep in mind those guys. Of course, I have to ask you guys about Jordan Spieth. I know he wasn't really on our list, but I'm curious. Jordan did not make the cut here last year. We know last year's golf game was not a good year for Jordan, but this year he is playing better. I do think his putting has its moments of greatness and a lot of WTFs as well. Either of your thoughts on Jordan this week?
Yeah. No, you just nailed it with him, because from one hole to the next, Spieth can look like he did when he was the number one player in the world, and he'll just be draining 20-footers, and then he'll miss a 4-footer. I didn't think he played nearly as well this past weekend as he did the prior week when he was basically at home, and I think was in a real good frame of mind. I think Spieth is maybe a guy that I'd look to go against in matchups this weekend, depending on who he's matched up against. I think he's very beatable here.
Spieth's a guy that, if you look at his results this year, he gets off to great starts. He's had several events where he's been, leading after round one or within a shot or two, and then just fades. He'll have one bad day, or overall the weekends are really struggles. So he's a guy, again, it's a long shot always to take a leaderboard or a leader after first round type of a guy. But if there's anybody on tour that has trended that way all year, it's definitely him. He's a guy that comes out, whether it's just, he's coming in, he's fresh, he's ready to go, he's excited about the tournament. He plays well that first round, that second round, guy you'll expect him because of that to make a cut, but the cut prices on these guys right now aren't the best. You're going to lay probably around 200, 250, I think last I looked for him. But he's a guy, I think, early in the tournament, yes. But as it goes on, there's too many question marks. You guys said it. There's too much uncertainty, and he falters. So I don't think he's a guy that I like to play, even for a top 20. He's just going to have that 175, I feel like, throughout somewhere in this tournament that's just going to take him out of contention.
Let's talk about a couple of guys who are big names that we haven't mentioned yet. I think we did mention Justin Thomas briefly. If you're looking for value, you're not going to find it with Justin Thomas because he's priced pretty low, but he certainly looms as a threat to win this tournament. He's in excellent form, coming out of a very good performance, a tremendous performance on Sunday. I think it's a course that sets up reasonably well for him. Do you automatically look at Thomas in some fashion here as a matchup possibility? I don't think he's worth playing as an outright.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to do, Dave. I'm going to segue that question to Nick. So I'm looking at Thomas's last 3 years. He missed the cut in 2017, 56 in 2018, and 36 last year. Now, I don't want to buy into too much again because you guys both have mentioned how well he's playing now. Am I looking at this course history too much and thinking that Justin Thomas isn't worth a play here?
Maybe sometimes, especially when the guy doesn't have a huge history there. I don't think there's a lot to be bought there. I think he's playing so well right now. His confidence is so well that I don't think I'd go against him for the reason Dave said, more because the value's not there on him, not necessarily because of the course, but he's definitely not a guy I'm looking at this week just because of the price that's on him. But I still do think he'll probably have another good week. He's another guy that's just week in and week out and 4 rounds. If you look at his last 2 tournaments, he had 2 rounds, 1 round at each place over par, and was still right there at the end of those tournaments, just showing how good he can be when he's on. So not a guy just because of value, but I don't think there's a lot to be said on his history here at this course, negatively anyway.
Okay.
And the other one I wanted to mention is Dustin Johnson, who we know he's had problems with his approach shots. But again, you can't draw too much out of 1 round, but boy, he looked good on Sunday. Yeah. And once DJ gets dialed in, he's as good as anybody out there. I wouldn't be shocked if he makes a big run at winning this event.
Really? So I'm looking at it, Dave, and he hasn't played there the last 5 years. And I know the guys choose to play certain courses that they're better at. When he played there in 2014, he had a top 35 finish. Not that that's anything to write home about if your name is Dustin Johnson, but not like he played badly. Nick, what are your thoughts on TJ?
I like him. I think he played well last week. I think he's a guy that it's hard to go against him. I actually have bet against him a couple times this year because he has his when he gets kind of cold, he stays there for a while. But once he starts to show that spark, he's a guy you definitely don't want to get in front of. I know the markets, just like Koepka, were definitely adjusted for him this week. He was low odds, or better, I guess, high odds last week, but he's definitely dropped quite a bit this week. He's plus 138 for a top 20, which is not a really great number in a top 20 finish. So he's a guy that the markets have adjusted for. I do think he's going to play well this week. Again, value-wise, probably not going to take him only because of where his number is this time. But I wouldn't be surprised, as Dave mentioned, for him to finish pretty well.
Let me toss another guy out there because this is, to me, the mystery guy in this tournament. That's Patrick Cantlay, who's a tremendous player.
Yeah, hasn't played.
But he hasn't played. And, I'm trying to figure out how to measure that because we had all these guys coming in rusty in the first event, and the top players played pretty well. That being the case, Cantlay is obviously a top 20 golfer. So even though he hasn't played in either of these first two events, I think he's got to be live in this one. And again, I'm mentioning a guy who's not in my 5-pack, but definitely worries me. And if Cantlay gets out of the gate well on Thursday, he's going to be there on Sunday.
Nick, last 2 years, he finished 15th at the course. You mentioned a top 20 type of play is one of your favorites just because in case somebody starts to have a bad Saturday or a Sunday, they may still come back to life a little bit. Your thoughts on Patrick Cantlay?
About plus 135, plus 140, top 20 right now. He's a wild card because he hasn't played. At the same time, you could look at him like, he's fresh. It's not like these guys aren't playing golf, just because the tournaments aren't happening. They're still playing golf. They're still staying sharp. They're still practicing, getting things ready for tournament. The tournament is definitely different, I guess adrenaline going through your body, whatever you want to call it. But I like him this week. I think he's going to finish well. I think the fresh factor is going to come in. You got two. Most of these guys have played 2 weeks in a row. Not that that's hard for a lot of them, but they came off 3 months without an event. I think he's going to have a fresh factor. I think he's going to come out strong. I think he's going to play pretty well. Value-wise isn't huge here, but I do actually like him top 20, and I think I am putting a little bit on him this week for a top 20.
All right.
I'll mention one.
Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead, Kelly. I'm going to mention one of the guys that is in my 5-pack. You'll still get 4 other golfers when you buy the package. But I thought Collin Morikawa had his bounce this past weekend. He's coming off a brutal beat.
God,
beat.
Dave, that is the reason why I'm such an asshole to play golf with, and I make people putt their putts. I don't play gentleman's golf. I don't say you're good. If we're playing for money, you're putting that, and he is exactly why. That was absolutely a terrible beat.
But here's the thing. I mean, he was in a prime position to have a really bad tournament, and he still managed to make the cut. Now, he didn't play his best golf, to be sure, but I think he got it out of his system last week. I think he's a serious contender to win this weekend. You're no longer going to get great prices on Morikawa, but it's not bad. I mean, I got 35-1. I'll take that. This guy's going to be in the hunt. I think he's already a top 10 player. And to me, if you can get a top 10 player at 35-1, you just punch the ticket.
Yep. Yeah, he's a guy that you're right. It was clear to me, at least, that after that letdown, that was his first really, experience of losing like that. He's already won, but it was his first experience of having it right there and kind of lost it right at the last minute. So I felt like there was going to be a letdown. I faded him last week. I took Rahm over him, and they were neck and neck.
John Rahm.
Yeah, they were neck and neck through 3, and then Morikawa had a bad Sunday, and Rahm went up the leaderboard. So it ended up working out pretty well. But I think you're right, Dave. I think he's moving on past that. He's going to be a guy we're going to talk about week in and week out. There's a lot of youngsters on this tour that are they look really good. I think he's right up there. Sungjae Im is the other guy I've talked about times already that he missed the cut last week.
That's not a bad thing.
I think he's coming back here strong. I think we're going to see him finish well this week. I like Sungjae. He's definitely going to be a guy that I'm playing. I have to look where he was at. He was at
he's sitting at about 40-1 at Westgate.
And plus 160 for a top 20. I think he's definitely up there in that top 20, and I think that's pretty solid value at plus 160. So those are the two youngsters I think that are going to be guys we talk about all year.
Let's talk.
And by the way, short-term trend, 1-0 so far on guys who missed the cut. Webb Simpson missed the cut 2 weeks ago and came back and won last weekend. So maybe there's something.
All right, Dave. Let's talk about Webb real quick because he did have such a great week last week, especially on the back nine. Let's touch on your thoughts for him to run it back this week.
He's tough. It's really tough to win 2 weeks in a row, though. And I'm not saying he's a guy that I'd want to necessarily fade, but I don't think this is going to be his week. And he's going to have to actually look. Saturday, he was maybe the most fortunate guy on the entire course on Saturday. He hit 2 trees, which should have been 2 bogeys, and I think he actually birdied one of the holes because the ball there was, again, no rough. It just landed in some soft stuff, and he knocked it up there. But he played great, but it's really tough to duplicate that, and it was such a hotly contested event. I think there has to be a little bit of a drop-off this week. I don't think Simpson's going to have a bad tournament and suddenly, fall apart and miss the cut, but I'm not sure he's going to be in the leaderboard come Sunday.
All right, I mentioned Jon Rahm, and I want to talk about him as well this week, but let's talk about last year's winner really quick, Chez Reavie. I feel like if I remember this tournament last year, now sometimes they all run together, I feel like Reavie kind of came out of nowhere last year and stole the show at Travelers. Do you guys think there's any value in him doing that this year?
Not in his current form. He's going to have to show something more. He has not been sharp off the layoff. Some of the guys have struggled off the layoff, and he's a guy who's got to be at the very top of his game to contend for a championship, especially in a field this deep and powerful. I just don't see it happening.
100-1. I mean, attractive to bet on, right? But I haven't seen anything from either the first 2 weeks. He's not a guy that I think's worth any real dollars this week. He finished dead last week of people that made the cut and then didn't make the cut in the first event. So yeah, agreed. Not a guy to play.
So he's going up this week against Keegan Bradley in a head-to-head matchup. Maybe not worth a play to win it all, but maybe because he does know this course and he has won it in the past. Is that maybe worth a look here in this head-to-head matchup?
I'm going to say no because Bradley's a guy who, although he hasn't won big events, when he's in against a really good field, and that is obviously the case here with just about everybody except Tiger playing, Bradley's usually somewhere to be found on that first page, first or second page. Let's put it that way. He has he plays his best golf when he's up against the best, and I think Bradley's going to have a good tournament. I don't think he's going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bradley's somewhere in the leaderboard.
Yeah, I avoided that matchup altogether, Kelly. I looked at it and I've bet on Bradley, and he's a guy that the weeks I feel like he's going to do well because he's coming off a good week, he then underperforms and vice versa. So both of those guys were just guys I just couldn't get behind that match. I looked at it and go, yeah, skip right past it, moved right on. I don't have a big deal on those guys.
One thing on Bradley is sometimes you can tell on Thursday what it's going to be like for him, and that can make him more interesting in live action. His game is, if he's putting well, watch out. But he's not always putting well. He can get very erratic with the putter, and when that happens, he can go bad in a hurry. This is the type of course, though, that tee to green, he could be pretty good, and if he's making putts, he could be in the hunt.
Yep.
So I one person that my buddy Aaron's actually his caddy, so that's the reason why I wanted to ask you guys, and I know I didn't send you guys notes on him, so it might take a second. JT Poston has missed the cut too many times, last 3 times at this course. This isn't his course, but you can already bet that I'm going to send out a text message that says, hey, how's the practice round going? I'm just curious here because his odds do not say he's missed the cut the last 3 years at this course. It's very odd here to look at that and see and going, wait, those things don't correlate. What am I missing?
Simple. He's a way better player now than he was 2 years ago or last year. He is one of the young studs. And he's had 2 very good tournaments to start back in action off the level. I think it was 2 weeks ago and right around there this past weekend. I think it was 17 under or something like that. He's in really good form, and I don't see why he won't stay in good form. He's knocking on the door, and Poston's going to be I would expect him to win another tournament before the year's out. He's a terrific young player.
Poston's a guy I'm big on this week. He played great the first 2 weeks. He's I think he's one of only 3 players right now with 2 top 10 so far coming back. So he's a guy you got to kind of look at. And golf is ebb and flow, man. When you get in these rhythms, it's hard to fall out. When you do, usually you fall pretty hard. But when you are in it, it can continue for quite a while. And he looks good. His numbers this year on tour are very good. So I'm big on him this week. I like him. I think he's got good value this week. Nobody's really talking about him, but he's the only guy that's been up there on that leaderboard each of those first 2 weeks.
Yeah, when I just was scrolling through the notes and I saw that, and I was like, I have to ask. I know we didn't say that we were going to discuss it, but I just thought it was very odd that he's never played well at this course. But given his current form, his odds are significantly lower here. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say a guy that I might look to play against in matchups is Damon, who was right there going into Sunday, and he basically played the worst round of anybody on the course on Sunday. Shot himself out of it immediately. You go from 1 stroke off the lead and a chance to win to I finished like 50th. And he's a bit volatile anyway. I think he could have trouble getting back on track this week, and I haven't seen the matchup prices yet, but I'm going to look to see if there's a possibility of going against him in a matchup.
Another guy that I was kind of looking at for this week that has played well here the last 2 years is Jason Day. This week, his odds look a little juicy, and I know that anytime something looks a little too good to be true, you guys' thought? Do you guys either of you have thoughts on Jason Day?
I don't know if Jason Day is ever going to be a factor again on the PGA Tour. He's just got too many back issues, too many health problems, and he's just not the player he was. And it's a shame because he's incredibly talented, but he was struggling last year, made a caddy change, then made another caddy change. Has not played well in the first 2 events. He's a sadder version of Spieth in a way. Because I think Spieth's issue is mental, and I think he can overcome that at some point. I think Day's is physical. It's as simple as that. I mean, if you have back problems, golf can be even Tiger Woods, who's the greatest player I've ever seen, when his back was bad, it was like, boy, he looks like he's all done. And he finally got through that. But I don't know that Jason Day's going to be able to. I hope he does because he seems like a terrific guy, and I'm rooting for him. But he's not a guy I'd be investing money in right now.
Yeah, I talked about him each of the last 2 weeks. I faded him both weeks. He missed the cut both weeks, so he's made me money on that end. He was against Oosthuizen in the matchup in the first tournament at Colonial. Oosthuizen kind of, he was a guy that I was high on going into Colonial, but he made the cut, but really didn't look great that last week either. So I'm kind of laying off that matchup right now. If anything, I'd fade Day again just because everything Dave said. He's injury prone. He battles vertigo. It's another thing. He's had to withdraw from several tournaments over the years. So I joked, I think last week or the first week that, if he even finishes the tournament, he's worthy of a bet against. But this week, Oosthuizen, I wasn't happy, I guess that you could say, with how he was playing last week. So I'm going to lay off that one. But if anything, I think fade Day this week.
Apologies for any mic issues I was having. I just got a little message over here. That being said, we've got a few minutes left, guys. Anything that you personally want to touch on, whether it's this tournament specifically, any guys that maybe you're looking to fade, any guys that you're looking for in matchups, or any just typical kind of easy golf handicapping suggestions? I know that our audience always loves to hear little tidbits to help them become better handicappers themselves.
I'll throw a couple of guys out who I think you can look at in matchups, and maybe Patrick Rogers might be one of them. I don't think Rogers is going to win the tournament, but I think he's going to play well this weekend, and is a guy I'd consider in matchups. And I think Fitzpatrick, I mean, the guy's he's solid. And I would expect him to have another good tournament. I don't think Hatton will have a great tournament. That's a tough beat for him this past weekend. And he's a guy who can, he's kind of like a John Rahm light in that he can get down on himself in watching him last week, I think he may be maturing to the point where that won't be a factor anymore, but I still want to see what he does off a near miss. He played well enough to win and didn't. And he could be a guy that might be beatable in matchups this week.
Dave, real quick, to touch on Fitzpatrick, just looking at him, his odds are priced pretty high considering he's never played this course before. How do you put that into your handicapping? Do you weigh in on it at all? Or am I just overthinking the fact that he's still a great golfer and he's only 25 years old?
I might put more into it in a normal year. But nothing's normal out there this year. And it just seems to me like some guys have come out of this break really looking sharp. They were doing whatever they needed to do during the break. And Fitzpatrick fits that category. I mean, he's playing really well. He's a guy who's knocking on the door. I mean, he's going to break through and win at some point. He's good enough. I hope it's not this week because he's not on my ticket. But he's a guy that he's a little bit scary. And the fact is, he's been getting better in these tournaments. Last week, I think he played really well in the second round after an okay first round. Same thing the first week. I bet against him in a matchup the first week, and he came on like gangbusters in the second round and ended up beating me. Yep. So Fitzpatrick's a guy who I think is, he'd be a guy, I don't think he's going to win, but if you want to take a shot at if you can make top 20 wagers, and I know they're not available everywhere, but if you can wager on a top 20, he might be a guy that's worth a bet.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I mean, Fitzpatrick is a good young player. Not to touch on him personally, but that kind of theory in general, Kelly, about, you can always make an argument that guy that has a course experience is going to have the edge over somebody that doesn't. But if you kept that and that was your only tool that you were using, I mean, a rookie would never win, right? A guy that's only second year in would never win on tour. And that's just not the case, especially this year. You're seeing young guys playing great golf, coming right out of college and competing. And I mean, so I don't want to say you throw it out the window. It could be something you look at, but Fitzpatrick, all the numbers are there for him. He's trending in the right direction. He looks like as he's going to have his breakthrough sooner rather than later, like all these young guys are. So I'm not too worried about him not playing this week. And I do like him.
I'm not a huge course form guy, and obviously sometimes it pays off, but Matt Kuchar's a good example. I mean, if you're going course form, you just punch in Matt Kuchar's name last week and maybe even the week before, and you got a 41st out of him last week, and he missed the cut the week before when he put a ball in the water on 18 and cost me a matchup. Nice going, Matt.
Me too.
That was not a good ending in the first week back. So I'm weighing current form in and how the course sets up for the way they're playing more than what they've done historically. Again, if you're just going on history here, and it doesn't mean it can't happen again, but if you're just going on history here, you bet Bubba Watson and then just sit back and see what happens.
Very true. Yeah, in the course, there's certain courses that matter more for how you play there. Augusta is probably the number one course, and one thing you'll see there is lefties. Everything's a dogleg left, and it's easier to cut the ball and control it than it is to draw the ball. So lefties have a huge advantage. You got Bubba, you got Phil, you got Mike Weir, you got a ton of lefties that win at that place. So those type of trends can sometimes be useful, but not necessarily just blindly looking at how is this guy, one particular guy played at a course year in and year out. It's more, what kind of ball flight does he have? Does this course set up for that? And will that help him in that particular week? But of course, he's still got to be in form.
All right, Nick, I'll let you have the last word unless Dave has something else to add. Any tips for our listeners? Any matchups that you like? Any other long shots that you're seeing that might be worth a little bit, as VR would say, a little sprinkle?
Yeah, I like the coming off of the miscut angle. As Dave mentioned, Webb won this week on that. Jason Kokrak is finished third. First week, missed cut last week at even par. I think he's a guy, he's been playing well all season. He's a guy that has all the tools to come in and have a good showing this week. He's over 300 right now, plus 334 is the number I'm seeing on a top 20 finish. I think that's a no-brainer play for me. So I think he's a guy that's going to show up. And I already mentioned Sungjae Im. I think he's going to have another good week this week. Again, miscut. Rarely has those. I think both guys coming off that miscut are going to come in here strong. Those are two guys I'm high on this week.
Sungjae Im placed 21st last year. I think I'm definitely going to have him in my top 20 plays this week. Dave, go ahead.
Well, I'll just throw one more of the miscut guys in. He's not the most popular guy on tour, but Patrick Reed's a pretty good player.
Patrick Reed, yeah.
Was good 2 weeks ago. Did not have a good tournament last week. I would look for Reed to rebound and put together a strong performance this weekend in the Travelers.
And he does play here every year. I'm pretty sure. I was looking at that yesterday, Reed. So at least he's familiar with the course.
He definitely is. He missed the cut
And
in
there's no-
2018. Last year, he was top 30.
Yep.
And there's nobody to boo him.
Ha! Dave!
Maybe he's beating that.
Oh my goodness.
I personally think he likes it. I think he likes being the heel.
He definitely feeds into that.
Yeah, there's just like UFC, you have like John Jones, some of those type of guys, they feed off the negative energy. I can definitely see that. Some people enjoy being the villain.
Reed plays his best golf in the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup, those events that are just fan interacting, yell, scream loud. You're absolutely right. He loves the fans. I think he's the guy that might be missing them.
Maybe he should have his own caddy yell at him.
Tell him how
Make
much
him
he
feel at
sucks.
home.
Yeah.
You idiot. What are you doing? You're not supposed to hit that club, you dope.
There you go. All right, guys. Make sure you guys are giving Dave a follow at Dave Cokin. Nick is at Borrman00. Both great information today, guys. Nick, you want to plug your package real quick, and then I'll let Dave plug his before we end the show.
Yeah, I'll have my package. I don't have it up. If you're watching this live right now, I don't have it up, but I'll have it up by Tuesday night. It'll have head-to-head plays plus some tournament plays, top 20s, top 10s, and even a couple sprinkles in there for outright winners. So it'll be up by Tuesday night.
I love it. And Dave, you have a $9 special. You have 5 outright winners.
Yes, I don't know if it's up yet because Missy's putting it up for me because I'm pretty much technologically the dumbest person on the planet. So it could be up or maybe not. Just go to WagerTalk.com. It will be up at some point today. 5 outrights, and it's $9. And I will just tell you that I would recommend looking for matchups to play the 5 outrights that I have as well if you want a little added action, because obviously I think they're going to do well.
I like it. I'm going to head over to WagerTalk.com. No, I'm not. I'm actually just going to text Dave and say, can you please just give me your plays as well as Nick? Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. And we didn't have any crazy bad technology things happen. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week.